us to begin, if you may, with a word of prayer. And Brother Allen has agreed to lead us as we pray together. Let's pray. Holy and righteous Father in heaven, you have blessed us with so many things, given us our lives, given us an opportunity to be here this morning, study more of your word and your will for us. We're so thankful to you for all these things, thankful to you for the blessings of life, our ability to provide for our families, thankful for each and everyone's presence here, and that the lesson we received this morning is beneficial to us if we take it to heart, that we do the things that you would have us to do. Father, we're mindful that there will be some who are not with us this morning because they're not feeling well, they're sick, or there are those of our member who have chronic illnesses. We ask that your comfort can be upon them. We ask you to go with us now as we continue this study. Lord, Jesus, the holy name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, we're studying from the book of Genesis, and we currently are ready to look at chapter 7. In previous chapters, we looked at in chapter 5 the history from Adam to Noah, and then the last chapter, the coming judgment and the call of Noah. But in chapter 7, we find the record of the coming of the flood. And so we invite you to turn to Genesis 7, beginning in verse 1. And the Lord said to Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. Of the fowl also of the air by sevens, the male and his female, to keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. And Noah did according to all that the Lord commanded him. And so we find this rather chilling passage of God's judgment to come and its nearness at this point. God said to Noah, somebody made this point, I hadn't thought about it before they made it, but I don't remember there being any reference to God ever appearing to Noah. Righteous. What do you make of the word for there in verse 1? Come into the ark, which represents safety, doesn't it? For salvation, physical salvation. For. Yes, sir.
This for in context seems to be more of a because.
Yes, sir.
You know, because you were righteous, the entire world was wrong and unrighteous, and so I'm saving you.
Exactly. There are a lot of smart people who would suggest that your behavior has nothing to do with God's grace. And they're fighting against a point that's made over and over again in the Scriptures. Noah did not earn anything, but it was because of the choices that Noah made. That men have over and over again determined that God is gracious and has nothing to do with anything that you do. We still hear that preached by smart people. It is not biblical. It never has been. There is such a thing as conditional grace. It is not deserved. It is not merited. But it is based upon the choice you make, whether you receive that gracious forgiveness of God, His mercy. And when I read words like this, for I have seen thee, I think Mark is exactly right. It's cause and effect in that sense. Yes, sir.
How many times throughout the Old Testament do we see where God is going to bless somebody or God is going to do something for somebody because of something they did? You know, because Solomon asked for wisdom and not riches and everything else. Because Josiah had the reaction he did when they read to him the book, the law, for the first time. Because, all of these because God doesn't, even when he's, causing the judges to come and give relief to the Israelites at the time of Judges, it's because of the promise that I made and because that they called on me to do it. They're turning to me. That's the thing. God doesn't send a judge to help them when they're not being oppressed and when they're not calling to him and asking for that help.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, sir. Brother Rod.
It's pretty plain here. He was because of his righteousness. How does the Calvinist deal with this right here? It's very plain and straightforward to me.
Well, I find it a lot in Protestantism. The idea that to say we are required to do anything is work salvation. And that I always think about, the Lord's statement, be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee the crown of life. Well, is that work salvation? It's not merit salvation, but it is conditional grace. And that point, as Mark said, is just hard to miss in the Scriptures. Yes, sir.
Sometimes I have to read something a couple of times before I pick up on a detail somewhere. Do we have any reference up to this point about clean and unclean animals and message to know about how to bring those in? Apparently he knew.
Right. Great question. And the short answer is no, we really don't have any indication of that. What was meant by the clean animal, but Noah did know, didn't he? Now later on in the law, Leviticus 11, you have the distinction made there. And this more about this later, that also is, I can't be sure about, it's just suggested. Over in chapter 9, after this is all over, and we're going to start again, we have a little different instruction given concerning what they could eat. Previous to this time, they had been eating, it seems, a vegetarian diet. But now, in verse 9, every moving thing, chapter 9, verse 3. God says to Noah, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things. So it doesn't seem that there is a restriction about what they could eat, even after they were allowed to eat meat. So maybe what that says is that the clean and unclean animals, whatever the lines were they the same as Leviticus 11? Were they some different? I don't know. But it seems to be more related to the sacrifices than to eating. They were not to eat meat. And then when God allowed them to eat meat, they could eat of everything, not blood, as he goes on to point out there in 9. Not things that were dead. That's also, I think, pointed out in 9. But the clean and unclean seems to be in reference to the animals that were to be sacrificed. So at least that seems suggested. That's a great question, and that's about all I know with that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, maybe you mentioned the other day about Noah this has been revealed to him. He was writing back about time, way ahead of, he come a long way ahead of this. And so he had insight, and it may have been the way he did. You made that point earlier, I think, about some of the things about how he did.
You talking about Moses? Yeah, right. Well, yeah, but
Yeah, Moses, I'm sorry.
yes, sir. But I think you make a good point, though. It seems to me in the days of Noah, they did have a special category of clean animals, and that was to be counted differently in terms of the numbers that were to be taken. So, but we don't, as far as I know, have any other information about that. Yes, sir.
You know, the thing with Noah, he didn't just pay lip service. I mean, he was distinct, you know, the rest of the people were wicked. But to build this ark, the tremendous amount of effort that would have gone into that, you know, and there's only one reason he would have done it, because God told him to do that. And so, you know, he does stand out, and you know, that's why God, he found grace in God's, you know, you see that there's a definite connection there. But I wonder if people realize just how much that involved when God said do this, and it wasn't something easy, you know, go pick up some sticks or something. I mean, he really had to, and this went on for like 120 years. So, I mean, it shows the heart of Noah. And I don't think God, like, turned him into a robot or anything.
Yeah, you make a good point, Don, too. When we read 7 and verse 5, Noah did all. You know, I think the first time that's given is back over in chapter 6, isn't it? Verse 22, the last verse there. Noah did all. But I think over that whole period of time, it wasn't just the first day of the first week. But at the beginning and at the end, it could be said of Noah, he did all that the Lord commanded. Yeah, I think his obedient faith is hard to top in terms of its example. That's a great point. Yes, sir.
I think it's interesting too that this, up to this, you know, it seems that even now this is the worst generation that's ever been upon the face of the earth. And even in that time, with all the cultural influence and stuff going on that we read about in this, that they were exposed to all of that. He says they were faithful in this generation.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great point. They take away my excuses. You know, this is a wicked old world. You know, it's been wicked for a long time.
But you can't say, well, it's just everybody else is doing it.
Yeah.
It's culture.
And we'll get to Ham. Ham is sort of a different case. But I think the point's been made. He was able to raise a family, you know, through all that.
I can't help believe too that while he's building this, you know, they're probably mocking him. So he looked like a fool out there building this boat.
Yeah. I'm sure you're right. But he preached, didn't he? He probably told them, and he also showed them his example. And in all those ways, I'm sure he did. That's what faith is. You know, faith is believing God before it happens. Faith is believing based on the promise. And I think all that is true. So, yes, ma'am.
It also shows like vindication for all of his efforts. You know, maybe he was mocked, and probably one of the last things that entered the minds of those people who were condemned was, well, I guess he's not so silly. I guess he's not as crazy as we thought he was. And that indicates our example too. We may not be vindicated even until judgment for false things that may be said about us, but the Lord will make sure that truth is revealed.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you. Somebody else have a point there. So let's take a look at, let me notice, if yet 7 days, that's verse 4, isn't it? By this point in time, the ark surely is built, but we've got to get the animals on there, and I think God drew the animals. I don't know that Noah was out safari hunting trying to find. I think that the idea, but he had to enter the ark. He put the food on the ark. He got the animals on the ark, and that was a process. And maybe he began living there at this point in time. But we'll find that it was on the day of the flood that Noah entered the ark and the door was shut. Verse 6, then. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him, into the ark because of the waters of the flood. Of the clean beast and of the beasts that are not clean, of the fowls and everything that creeps upon the earth, there went in two and two unto Noah into the ark, the male and female, as God commanded. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. It must have been quite a furious activity those last 7 days. Final preparations. Everything must be ready. Everything must be right. But in verse 11 we read, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven opened. And it rained upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And in the same self day entered Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them into the ark. They and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth after his kind, and every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. They went in unto Noah into the ark, 2 and 2, of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. And they that went in male and female of all flesh, as God commanded, and the Lord shut him in. Quite a dramatic moment. We remember, the timing of this. So when do we mark the beginning of the flood? The 600th year of Noah? What month? 2nd month, what day? 17th day. I guess as we write dates, we would put it 2/17/600. And so this is marking the beginning of the flood. We will find that their presence in the ark lasted a lot longer than 40 days, didn't it? Yes, sir, Mike.
I'm thinking it was classified as the 17th day of the 2nd month of Noah's 600th year, rather than a physical calendar.
I don't think so. I think that as we keep reading, we'll find that the ending of that date, I think it's marking the time of year and helping us understand the beginning point and the ending point. It lasted more than a year, actually, as it turned out. The end date, 8/14. No, let's see, where is it? The waters were seen and so on. I think it is the 2nd month, the 7 and 20th day of the month, the earth was dried. Well, it'd be more than 10 days, wouldn't it? It couldn't be. Anyway, I think we're talking about a space of time there. Yes, sir.
I was going to say, the other thing, birthdays are much more fairly modern thing than what they used to be. There was a point in time when everybody just on the same day basically counted themselves 1 year older, and that was it. So that's it's kind of helpful, because if you say New Year's everybody's birthday, 2 months, 3 months, whatever into the year, it doesn't matter. It's all just the same. It's an easy way to tell time as well. It's just based off of whenever everybody turns that next year. That's the first day of the first month.
Yeah.
It was done like that for a long time in old days when it was back when most people didn't have calendars. They only went by the weather and the seasons and everything else.
And it could be that Moses here, in writing about this, would have reckoned it in terms of the Jewish calendar. What reckoning of time Noah would have had, I can't be exactly sure how their calendar looked. But I think in comparing it with the Jewish calendar, the second month, depending on which of the Jewish calendars you use, could have been fall or it could have been spring. And I can't be dogmatic about it. I've always thought that spring was an appropriate time, for the ark to land, and it landed, and they left the ark in the second month, just like they entered it the second month. So anyway, I think that's there's some question there, but that seems to be the idea. Somebody else had a point. Yes, sir.
So from 6 to 7 is about 120 years, chapter 6 and 7. Would that be correct?
I think when God said their days should be 120 years, I can't be, again, dogmatic about it. I think God made the purpose 120 years ahead of time. And I have no reason to believe that his announcing that to Noah would not have been very soon after that. So, yes, sir, I think that's about right. Somebody else, okay. So, it's in the second month, 17th day of the month, that this flood will begin in Noah's 600th year. Then that expression in verse 11. I suppose we could spend, half a quarter talking about the geology and meteorology of the flood, and we'd have to get somebody else to do it because I'm not qualified. But just as a simpleton and as just a Bible student, and not an expert on plate tectonics and other such matters, through the years as I've read that and tried to imagine in my mind what he means by the fountains of the great deep being broken up and the windows of heaven open, I've tried to imagine how that the waters seem to be meeting in the middle, and I do remember, sleeping through an earth science class one time where they were trying to teach us about how that great tsunamis can be caused by earthquake activity and the great plates of the earth shifting. And even a guy like me knows enough to know that if you have an earthquake, it may be many hundreds of miles away, but it can create a wave that will just sweep over an entire area. And so you think about the waters being moved around because of great shifts in the earth and the fountains of the great deep broken up. Maybe that's what that has reference to. And then you think about rain, torrential rain like maybe we've never seen coming down from above. And you can think about the power of water. If you've ever lived in an area where they had, flooding of that nature, you certainly can appreciate the damage that flooding can do. We saw some of that in North Carolina here recently. Terrible, amazing damage done by the rushing of water. So it seems every corner, the devastation comes. And I can't help but think about that passage Miss Lori was talking about, how people will ignore the judgment until it can't be ignored. Matthew 24, didn't the Lord make reference to this very thing when he compared his coming? And we have no idea when the Lord is coming ultimately, do we? Or the coming of judgment even upon Jerusalem, as which I think he's also talking about in this passage. But in both cases, the idea is that there will be many who will not take the warning, who will not listen to the words, and who will be caught unaware. Matthew 24, I think it's about verse 37, isn't it? Yeah. And as the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not till the flood came and took them all away. so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Exactly. You can just believe there was somebody who had their wedding planned for 217 in the 600th year of Noah. Bad day. They were unprepared. So this is again a picture of the flood. Those who did not want to hear were completely blind to the danger that God had announced. What a question you have.
Wes, I had read, I don't know if it's any truth, but I'd read that from creation to the flood was around 1,600 and something years.
Yeah. I think you can make a case for that. That goes back to the genealogies. Yes, sir. So I think that's fair.
It didn't take very long, did it?
No,
Things get real bad.
it did not. And as we remember chapter 11, it won't take long after the flood for things to start heading that direction again. Yes, sir.
I read somewhere way back, there was some comment that, this was a flood that could have only taken out this portion of the land because the people were
Yeah.
all over the place, because the circumstances are that if the entire earth were covered with water, then it would be physically impossible to actually survive or even breathe the air. But, when you consider all of, even as that is a possibility of the entire, as it is, the entire earth being covered in water. God created this earth, and if God was able to speak this into existence, I think we could be
Yeah.
confident that God took care of these
I agree with you.
people.
Yeah. It's a great question, by the way. I hope we'll deal with that in just a minute about the question of a local flood, or at least give a little bit to that. Yeah, it's always interesting. People say, well, if that had been the case, people would have had a hard time breathing. Good news is, weren't many people breathing. So that's one point to consider. Not to be flippant, but it is interesting how people will tell us that, what the Bible says happened could not happen. And these are the same people who want to tell us that the world came into existence from nothing. That always was, if you want to look at a fairy tale, that's what a fairy tale looks like.
I think you brought this up before, we tend to, I think, as a whole, present this to children as such a joyful,
Yeah.
happy and smiling, everybody just thrilled, getting on. But this was a very destructive,
Yeah. Horrible.
horrible thing that occurred,
Yeah.
a tragic.
No question. Someone else? Yes, sir.
I was just going to repeat the point. God made it all, and He spoke it into existence. And that's where the people that try and doubt this stuff come from, because they're not they don't believe that God made everything, and so in order for that, everything has to follow the rules that they believe the world goes by. God does not operate within the normal laws of nature, physical rules the world has to live by, and that's, because they discount that in the first place, they try and act like, well, this couldn't happen. God can do it.
Yeah.
And that the whole point of it is God can do it. And, it's why you have a hard time, with conversations like this with those that don't believe, is because you're coming at it from basically on two different mountains. The one where the person believes and everything is built on that belief, and the other one where the person doesn't believe and everything is built on that unbelief.
Yeah.
And so, until you can say, okay, you have to look at it from our perspective in that, God can do anything versus, if there is no God, none of this happens, correct, right? That's what they're getting at. But I'm telling you, there is a God that happened. They can't believe that it happened unless they believe there's God, and that's why it's just kind of a non-starter for a lot of those folks who go try and talk to them about it.
Yeah, it's the old point that you either believe in creation with a creator or creation without a creator. That's it. And I think verse 16 hints at that. You know, it may be in a subtle way. The last phrase there says, the Lord shut him in. Now, this is the work of God. This is not just the story about a man and his family. This is a story about God working in the world to destroy a world that he loved and that he made and that was good. It was very good. It's a sad thing, you know. This is not joyous. This is a rejection of God that results in a rejection of man. Verse 17. Let's look at the rest of this chapter. Beginning in verse 17, and the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare up the ark, and it was lift up above the earth. And the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl and cattle and beast, and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, died. And every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle and creeping thing and fowl of the air. And they were destroyed from the earth, and Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. It is this powerful statement, all flesh died. What God made, he now destroys. He had the right to make it. He has the right to take it out. But it was Noah only that remained, he and his family, in the ark. And that is directly tied in Scripture to his reaction to God's call. The grace of God responding to a man who obeys the call of God in the works of Noah. Question or point you have about these words? Yes, sir.
When he talks about the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days,
Yeah.
would that consider that to be 150 days minus the 40?
Yeah, and that's a good question, and smart folks have disagreed about that.
Just curious, it's not.
But
One way or the other, it's just curious.
it makes it either 5 months or 6 months, basically. And I tend to fall in the category of the 5 months for reasons that we'll talk about maybe just very soon. But I think likely it's inclusive. It's 40 days of rain plus another 110 days makes it 40 days. But again, smart folks might disagree with that. Let's deal with Mike's other question a moment ago, with a point that he raised, and we've all heard it before. Was this flood a local flood? Let's cheat and go ahead a little bit to chapter 8 and verse 9. I think that's what I'm looking for here, isn't it? Yeah, chapter 8 and verse 9. The dove found no rest for the sole of her foot, and she returned unto him in the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. Now, earth, some say, well, that means just the land. But when you look at all these references, it just doesn't seem to leave any room for a local flood. Chapter 6 and verse 5, where was the wickedness? God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. If he was trying to save Noah from that, why didn't you just tell him to move? If it was just bad over here in this valley. Chapter 6 in verse 13, God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Doesn't sound like a local flood, does it? Chapter 7 and verse 4. In 7 days I will send rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground. Chapter 7, verse 22. Everything on dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. It raises the question, why would you need to build an ark? Why did Noah just leave? Why would you need to bring these animals in? There are going to be animals other places. So the whole thing really just doesn't make much sense once you think about it. This idea that it might have been just a local flood. Chapter 7, verse 23. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground. Man, animals, creeping things, birds of the heaven, they were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark. This is, again, not the language of a local flood, is it, or a local judgment. Chapter 9 and verse 11, I will establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. If that's a local flood, how can that promise have been kept? Have we not seen plenty of local floods? And so, again, the reason why men move to that is they've been told, well, it's not possible. I don't think that's true. And I think there are folks smarter than me who could make a case that it's in fact not impossible. That exactly what the Bible points out here could and did take place. It's just, I think there are other reasons why men fight so hard against a worldwide flood. One of the reasons is because of its symbolism. And the Apostle Peter, for example, will look back at this and he will say that God destroyed the earth once with water. He will destroy it, melt it, take it away the next time by fire. I think that the whole promise of God of a day of reckoning, Peter builds upon the fact that the flood did take place just as God said. And men don't want that. Yes, sir.
I don't know if I read this or heard it, but they said that on Mount Everest they have found fossils in the ocean.
Yeah.
That's over 29,000. I think that's where airlines fly.
Yeah.
How would you get there?
How you get that?
And I don't understand that, but
So some of you guys have been to the Grand Canyon. They'll say, well, the Colorado River did that. Really?
I look at that, yeah, it's interesting. When I went and saw that, I just assumed that was probably done from flood. And I went to Monument Valley, and you see these monuments that are over 1,000 feet high. And you can see like water levels.
Right.
I mean, you can see where, like, I was thinking, well, that's part of the flood. I said my thinking.
Sure.
I said, when it said all this loose material fell, it left this stone face here. And I said, I can see that water done that. So that's what I associated with the flood.
Yes, sir. And these are the same folks who will say, well, you're not scientific if you don't, if you believe in the flood. I think it's hard to ignore.
I see this too. This was recent. I went to the Grand Canyon. And you say, well, those water levels would not have been there that long. Well, inside the dam, Hoover Dam, Lake Mead, in 83, the water level got up. I don't know if you're familiar, but there's two big holes they drilled when they was building that dam for overflows. Well, in 1983, when President Reagan was in office, they had a mass flood in that area. And it overflowed, Lake Mead come up so high that it had to go in spillways. And it had no flood happening since like that, since 1983. And you can still see the water level like it was done last week. Where it got up so high on the wall.
Yeah.
On the wall.
Yeah. Yeah, I
It's
think,
just as plain as it was the day that it happened.
make a good point. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Also in 7:19, it references the whole heavens.
Right.
So that's not even in relation to the earth.
Right. And we didn't, this is just a handful of just one after another. If he was trying to tell us it was a worldwide flood, he couldn't have said it any more plainly, could he? Yeah. But you will read believers who will say that. I read a book on Job a few years ago, and that was that fellow, I thought it was a pretty good book, but he lost me when he started talking about the flood because he argued for that. Yes, sir.
One same way today.
Yeah. We have ruined and marred what God made, and that's the greatest crime we can commit. You know, sinning against you is terrible. Sinning against God is the worst. Is the worst. Yes, sir.
One of the other things, just in reference to this, we've got a word, verse 20, indicating that the mountain will come.
Yeah. If it's just this mountain, then again, why did they just all move? Go somewhere else? You know, that just never did ring true, did it? Right, right. Yes, sir.
Thinking you were hitting upon it, the tragedy event was the sin, all the sins.
Right.
Led up to this. This is God's righteous action. The unrighteousness is what's the ugly part of this. And we can learn from that
Yeah.
ourselves. And Jesus is right there at this time too, of course. And of course, it's all leading up to him. That's what saves Noah. In the end, is Jesus' blood covers that too. So when I look back, I'm trying to deal with this in my head. I'm thinking about like when Abraham looked over Sodom and Gomorrah and pleaded to God there, and we saw that the end of that was the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The tragic thing, or was it the sin of those people in Sodom and Gomorrah that led to that, the righteous judgment of God?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think about it, and just then you can apply it to yourselves, how worthy you are of destruction, but you find grace too by living the right way and relying upon Jesus.
Yeah, really good point. And people will say, well, you know, this is the God of the Old Testament. He's so mean. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. The next chapter, God remembered Noah. God is gracious. He wants to forgive. He made us. He loves us. But He will not tolerate sin endlessly. He will not. And that's, as you point out, that's one of the great lessons of this whole story. God loved the creation. He made it carefully. It was all good. If somebody, you know, we've read this so many times, it's hard for us maybe to appreciate the shock of this whole episode. We're reading along, we're thinking, oh, this is great, this is beautiful. And sin enters, and suddenly it gets so bad because of the decisions of men that God said, I'm going to wipe it out. I regret that I made man. It's hard to have a more surprising, shocking, sad turn in a story. But God remembered Noah. Yes, sir.
Kind of brought this up earlier, so to speak. It's, a lot of us people, you know, we're playing for circumstances. This is the circumstances I was in, it's what I grew up in, it's what I grew up with. And so, you know, this is just, you just want to do this, but I can't do this in these circumstances. This is just how it is. It can't be done. But God, basically Noah convicted those people by his righteousness. They were convicted. You that follow after God under his circumstances. He was around those circumstances. Yeah. 8 people were saved. 8 people consider Lot. Basically was the only righteous man.
Right.
They grew up, and if they were around that corrupt environment, bad situation, circumstance.
No excuses for my choice, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is on us, it's
Yeah.
on me, it's my decisions.
Absolutely. Guys, I appreciate so much your help, and we'll continue with chapter 8, Lord willing, Wednesday night. Thank you very much.